I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to The Conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm glad to be here. Glad to have you along as well. Today's program, a really good one, an important one. We're talking about our communities at crossroads. We have elections coming up very soon, and we want to begin or elevate the conversation on some of the critical races in our communities. Joining me today is my good friend and an activist in the political, cultural, educational arena, philanthropy arena as well. And that is Anika Robbins. She's here representing Black Votes Matter. She's the founder and prime force, the voice of Black Votes Matter. And we're going to be interviewing a couple of leaders in community who have vested interest in ensuring that our legacy institutions both are served and play their role in motivating, encouraging people to articulate our own interest as we move our community to the polls. Before we start with Anika, I wanted to remind you, thank you for watching the program, for supporting the conversation with Al McFarlane. And there's something I need you to do, and that is to become a subscriber. We're trying to get about 1,000 subscribers to this channel. And the way you become a subscriber is simply to go to YouTube Insight News, click on subscribe, like and share, and send a note to all of your friends, everybody you know, send them a note saying the conversation's on every day at 1:00 and that they should be a part of it and they should be subscribers as well. So do that, help us grow this channel. We think that this idea of us talking to us and talking to the world is a critical idea. It's a good idea. And we think that we have to just build on it and grow it. Well, with that, let me bring in my friend and my colleague, Anika Robbins. Anika, how are you? Good to see you again, as always. How you doing?
I'm great. Good morning, Al. Always a pleasure to be here.
Well, absolutely. And the election, you've been for years now out banging the drum, rallying the troops, encouraging, teaching, telling, inviting, cajoling our community to pay attention and to get involved. So let's have that conversation right now. Why is it so important that we become relentless, that we remain relentless, unstoppable in motivating our people to come to the polls?
Thank you so much. I thank you for pointing that out. It is always important to exercise our civic duty. It's always important for us to vote, to stay at the table for critical conversations. As a Gen Xer, I'm just keenly committed to making sure that millennials and, Gen Z and the generations that come behind them understand that it is something that as a tax-paying citizen, it's your right, but it's your duty. And so, but we also realize that there is a knowledge gap about how to engage. And so that's why we've spent a good amount of time focusing on voter education, because we understand that a lot of folks, even educated folks, don't always understand like who's on the ballot, what are the issues that they're advocating for, where to vote, how old do you have to be. And so we have to help the community understand that if there are things happening in your community that you're not pleased with, these folks are hired via the vote to implement change, to listen to you, and to make sure that they are serving your interests. And the moment that you feel like they're not doing that, then you have the right to fire them via the vote. And so we are really issuing a strong appeal to young Black men in particular, because they are the most disenfranchised in this country, in our communities. And yet most of the policies impact them the most, from mass incarceration, employment, access to capital, and so many other things. And so this is why it has been a calling, of mine to really just make sure that we are unrelentless, or relentless in making sure that people understand. And again, real quick, my commitment to it is, in my day, we weren't really thinking about politics. We felt like Martin Luther King and everybody marched. They sat on the back of the bus and We don't have to sit in the back of the bus no more. So things are cool. But one thing we have to remember is that there are folks who may be voting against your interests, who are working 2 a.m. holding meetings, making policies, changing laws that affect you. So while you're sleeping. So it's important for us to stay woke for real.
Well, let's dig in a little bit. I'm glad you talked about back in the day,
Mhm.
because there was a time, and sometimes we hear it still,
Mhm.
where our community says it's divided, describes itself as divided. It's us versus them. It's the new people versus the old people, the young
Ah,
versus the old.
mhm.
And we are all familiar with the Willie Lynch story of how
Yes.
we keep Black people divided and therefore suppressed.
Mhm.
But how do you describe the generational shift? And I'm saying that recognizing that I'm speaking as an elder, but I'm recognizing your movement
Mhm.
in my direction, right? I'm
Yes, I have
recognizing
embraced my
your,
impending elderhood.
your movement in my direction. And so, given that we are a generation apart, a little bit more than that maybe,
Yeah.
but we both are committed to the same vision, the same idea. How do you assess how we've come through and how we must come through, not being sidetracked by false ideas, by ideas that tend to um, discourage,
Yeah.
distract,
Mhm.
and neutralize our power? What do you think?
Yes. I think that's a very important question. And as you know, Al, everything I do is deeply rooted in our ancestral wisdom and culture. And our culture has always been intergenerational. We've always moved as a family unit. We've always moved as a community. But in recent years, the last few generations or decades, we've seen this kind of strong individualism and almost separation from the concept of community. I don't know if we have upper mobility to blame for that, but I'm here to tell people unequivocally we need our elders and our elders need our youth. There's a lot of shared knowledge that needs to be exchanged. I have always acknowledged the brain wealth of our elders. We need to learn. Granted, there's a lot to be learned from next gen, right? Especially where technology is
Mhm.
concerned. And, certainly social media has changed our ability to have impact and influence. However, there are just methodologies and just some knowings around your way around the block, right? That just cannot be ignored or denied. And so I have always worked really hard to make sure that we're infusing all of the voices, right? And even in gender, right? Because that's another one between men and women, So we have to make sure that this thing remains inclusive of all who we are. But we can't do this in silos. We absolutely cannot do this in silo. I've learned a lot from you. I've learned a lot from Bill English, who is
Mhm.
my lifelong mentor, who's actually the force behind a lot of the work that we're doing. And I'm inspired by him.
Mhm.
Bill
Sure.
English is 89 years old, and we were just having community conversations in St. Cloud with Black leaders there. So seeing him do that inspires me, but I also learn a lot about how to navigate and maneuver in political landscapes. It's
Uh-huh.
all about relationship building, and he is a master at that, as are many elders. And so that's really important to us. And then to our younger folk, they think, well, why bother? We have
Mhm.
to trudge through so much. They're discouraged, and rightfully so. And so the story of, well, your ancestors died and shed blood, that doesn't work on this generation. They are far removed from that. And what they see is kind of they're being ignored, they're being disenfranchised. But what we do in our work is encourage them to get involved, to learn, and we've been able to show clear examples of how we've won, right? So but again, consistent communication, consistent engagement, it's important for the elders to reach back to the youth, and then also for the youth to like not be so quick to try to set the elders aside. There's so much learning that could be learned from both.
Let's bring in Scott Redd, who leads one of the legacy institutions in Twin Cities, and that's Sabathani Community Center over in South Minneapolis. And Scott, thank you for being here. And I want you to just jump in and talk about the question of legacy, the question of institutional memory, and the question of how we create legacy institutions that support quality of life, a vision of freedom, a vision of completion, fulfillment for individuals and for family. Institutions that also stand as, a grand umbrella when we're in this torrential rain of disinformation and deception that the society sort of pours on us. But institutions like Sabathani have for the longest been bulwarks in providing a structure and a strength and a capacity for our people to survive and to move towards thriving. Scott Redd, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you, Al. Appreciate the invitation to be here. You know, at Sabathani, our mission is to provide people of all ages and cultures with essential resources that inspire them to improve their lives and to build a thriving community. And we've been doing that for 57 years. And what's interesting, we've been doing that because we have elders like Bill English, Beverly Franklin, that constantly push us to be better, right? In a way that challenges us to be the best when we get out of the bed and when we go to bed, to be the best that we can be for this community. I often say in my circle that that Minnesota, in my circle, we call Minnesota Mississippi with snow, because we have some of the largest disparities in the nation between Black and white folks. Whether it's home ownership, I believe it's only 25% of Black folks own their own home in Minnesota, or health disparities, education, graduation rates, so employment. So we're falling behind. So it's so important. What Anika is doing is making sure that Black folks get out and not just have a small piece of the pie, but I think we need to have the whole pie because we've been missing so many pieces for so long and not being, our voices not being heard, not being represented. And that's how you have the disparities that we see in Minnesota. So our job as a beacon of the community is that we don't do to the community, we do with the community. It's so important that we listen to the community. And the second part of that is being able to put action in place to make those listening sessions, those voices from the community come alive. And that's what we've been doing for the last 57 years. One of the things that we just did was a community needs assessment. And one of the biggest pieces that came out was intergenerational conversation. Now, you imagine we have folks all the way up to 92 and as young as 12 having conversations. And they know that we need to have those intergenerational conversations with each other, because we got to know how this community, this Black community in Minneapolis became so strong and so powerful. And yet it started to dwindle in the power and the voices that we have. So we got to figure our way to build back better and beyond. And the way we do that is by connecting our elders with our youth, having those intergenerational conversations and making sure that we're challenged, just like our board members, just like Bill English challenges us every day to make sure that we're out and that we're not asking, that we're demanding that our voices be heard.
Anika, talk about the events coming up. You've got a couple of important forums. Let's put those out front and center, and we'll come back and keep the conversation going. You're muted. Unmute.
Thank you, Al. Yes, we have a candidate forum series coming up called The Last Call. So this is basically a last chance for community members to come out and hear from the folks who are vying for an opportunity to serve the community. The flyer you're currently seeing is for our eighth ward forum, which will be hosted at Sabathani Community Center on Tuesday, October 24th from 6 to 8 p.m. But the day before that will be in the fifth ward at UROC from 5:30 to 7:30, and we'll be talking with Jeremiah Ellison, the incumbent, as well as Victor Martinez, who is, going for that seat as well. And then we have a Ward 4 forum coming up on Thursday, October 26th. We also have our voter guide. As you know, Al, we publish this annually, faithfully. It's nonpartisan. It features side-by-side comparisons of all of the candidates and where they stand on the important issues that matter to our community. So often our issues, our concerns, the things that matter to our community are kind of swept in or, woven into the broader narrative. But we understand that we have specific needs as a result of those disparities that Scott mentioned, right? So what are they going to do specifically for those things? And that can be found at blackvotesmattermn.com. And then we'll be hitting the streets, distributing physical copies as well. And they will be at all of the forums.
UROC is coming up. Talk about UROC. Makeda Zulu is here. My friend, how are you? Good to see you. And thank you for the important work you do as an institution serving our community. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Great. Take a minute and just describe for those who might not know the mission, the work of UROC.
Yes. So the mission of UROC is to transform the way universities and communities work together. And so right now, we just finished up the last day of the Coalition of Urban and Metropolitan Universities in DC. So I'm very excited about that. There are a lot of universities around the country who want to better serve the communities and better partner with communities to be relevant. And to make a difference. And so that's why UROC was created. And our mission also includes working around education and lifelong learning, community and economic development, and health and wellness. And one of our tenets is to not replace what is in the community, but to work with what is already in the community. And so that's just a little bit about UROC. It's the Robert J. Jones again. Also, I did not mention that because I am a fan, right? We don't always give the flowers as people are here. So Robert J. Jones was key in making sure that this happened in North Minneapolis. And we are the only place-based center in the country.
Amazing, wonderful. So it's appropriate that you host this important seminar or discussion about the election. And Anika, what will people learn? Let's go through the three that are on the books right now. You called it Last Call.
Yes.
That's a great name. Talk about the name. What do you want to impart? What do you want to be the result of getting people the information they need to vote and to be present?
Thank you. I think that's it. We just want them to vote and be present. But more importantly, we want them to make informed decisions. So oftentimes people vote blindly. I can't tell you how many calls and emails we get. People like, what are we voting for again? Who's running? So this is a great time to stress the importance of local elections, right? Because so often folks focus on the presidential campaign, which is important and it will be a big deal. And we see this election in 2023 as leading up to the very critical 2024 election coming up. But it does start here at home. There are many things that can be done that affects people's quality of life, the access to resources and programs and services. It may seem as simple as and mundane as, snow removal, but also the city's response to police accountability, their response to public safety, how they are addressing housing disparities. We know we have, low housing stock, affordable housing stock. And so these are things that, the incumbent, Jeremiah Ellison in Ward 5, and then his opponent is Victor Martinez. So These are things that you really want to push them and ask them what they're going to do this next round, you know. And I also want to point out, you know, the importance of having participated in the census. It is the reason why this particular cohort of council members have just served the 2 years, right? So after redistricting, we now have this kind of, I forget what it's called, but we're just on a 2 year cycle. They have to be voted in to, you know, carry out the remaining of their term because the lines have been redrawn. So all of these things are connected. And I want to encourage folks, you don't have to understand or know it all, but by participating and showing up, that's how you learn. You know, I started all this out of my own ignorance, right? Like, I don't know nothing about it, you know, but like, so building from that, how do we deliver this information in as clear and concise a matter as possible in a way that resonates to us, right? And so this especially in the with Fifth Ward, you know, we have a violence problem. You know, we're still reeling from the effects of George Floyd and the civil unrest, you know, COVID-19, and not to mention disparities that have, you know, persisted even beyond those things. So it's important conversation in all of these wards, Ward 4, Ward 5, Ward 8. Not to say that the others aren't, but this could be a real game changer in terms of the power shift in city politics, right? I know over in the Southwest Ward, there's someone who has served in that role for 25 years. And now someone else is moving into that position unopposed, right? We have newcomers like Kenneth Foxworth, who's going after Ward 7. So it's an exciting time. It can mean good change, but it will depend on how people vote.
Makeda, what are some of the bread and butter issues that you and our community in North Minneapolis deal with day in and day out? Let me commend you and your team over at Duroc, because what's obvious by the number of cars in the parking lot every day that you are convening our community across a broad range of issues and often. And so what are you reporting out as key concerns in the neighborhoods?
Thank you so much for that. And I still think we can be used even more. And you didn't ask me this, but UROC belongs to both the community and the university. So community should be using it for its self-determined Kujichagulia reasons. And that's what we've always been, or at least what I've always tried to promote, and we shall continue. But I'm so glad you asked, because I grew up just about 2 blocks south of UROC, and I live a mile north. So let me tell you what I've been thinking about. I don't speak for everyone, but I think there are others who may agree. And you're right, Anika, you don't have to be an expert, but you are an expert in what is important to you. And so that's why you show up at these forums and you ask the questions that make sense to you. So support for health and wellness initiatives that support issues that face this community, like diabetes, infant mortality, and addiction. Intergovernmental connection to get transportation and amenities like North Commons, the Lopet, the Upper Harbor Terminal, working as the residents who have been interested for years and invested for years in this community understand and had requested. So I need that to be clear, that as the folks that have been here and been invested have requested, there are others who are requesting how these things work as well. Also, ordinances that protect historical property and landowners and residents. We have a property issue. We we're landlocked, but we have a lot of properties that could be upgraded by neighbors. Let's be creative and figure out how the neighbors can invest in those properties in a way that doesn't devastate them, because we've been under-resourced, as opposed to all of the developers that like to come in and buy our homes. Housing that attracts new residents who value the history of this community. So we want new people, but you need to value who's been here. And I would say, if we can take a little note from Plymouth, I think Plymouth does a good job of having large housing units that fit into the community, that don't stand out. This is totally personal, nothing to do with UROC. I cannot stand these high-rise apartments. Okay. All right. We need infrastructure and upgrades with some imagination for the roads. And when I'm talking about infrastructure, I mean roads. I mean technology that benefits differing abilities, broadband innovation, a model that is done in conjunction with small town and rural communities. They're always pitting us against one another. Let's try an initiative that works with 3 different communities doing the same thing. And Anika talked about this a long time ago, that Black folks need to get out of here. And I had a chance to visit Paris recently.
Mm.
And I know we think of it as a romantic city, but I'm gonna tell you what I learned about Paris. I can get on a train and get anywhere, and it's safe and it's clean, and I don't have to have a car. All the cars there seem to be don't seem to have emissions issues. I thought that the U.S. was on the cutting edge. We are far behind, and maybe Minneapolis and St. Paul could be on the cutting edge of transportation. Who knows? Takes a little imagination, but why not put it out there? Accountability for hiring Indigenous, Black, and Brown, and those in poverty. So, when we talk about snow removal and talk about these roads, I get frustrated. But every time, I'll put it on a positive note. Every time I see a Black man on a job, or a Black woman, or a Latino, or an Indigenous person, and I can't tell you if I've ever seen an Indigenous person on these jobs, I get excited and honk my horn. Because why are other people benefiting and filling their pockets and taking tax money into their communities to build ours? And then an overhaul of city employees who see this as an issue. I don't think it's the folks at the top or the elected officials that are the problem. I think it's some of our city employees, and we need to figure out how to get rid of those folks. This is Makeda, not speaking for the University of Minnesota. All right. And what's working well? Because I also want to say, what is working well that we can keep working on? This cultural district work has been fantastic. I know it's still developing, so we don't see the full results of it. But we are taking control of our community in a way that puts money in our pockets, in the community pockets. So at least money can circulate about 3 times in our community. So I'm excited about that. We can look in the Camden area, West Broadway, along Plymouth Avenue, looking at North High. Devin George building this, manufacturing unit. These are all good things, and those things should continue. I am a part of Black Women Rising that supports we support Black women who are running. I'm also on the board of Women Winning, and usually that has nothing to do with city council. However, it has to do with city council values. So if your values do not align with mine, I am not looking to support. So those are things I'm thinking about.
You mentioned
just
that
a little bit. I'm sorry.
You mentioned that you were born 2 blocks south and you live a mile north. Talk about the neighborhood from your being a child of North Minneapolis and your vision that you've just shared, your analysis you've just shared about what the challenges are at the moment. But contextualize this. When you were a child, what did you envision for yourself and our community? Have you been disappointed, or have you been experiencing a sense of steady progress and fulfillment, or somewhere in between, or neither? What do you think?
I would say somewhere in between. I don't know that I envisioned anything, because I felt when I was growing up, I felt it was a beautiful place. So I wasn't seeking anything. In my block, just my block from 12th to Oak Park on Newton Avenue, we had a 4-plex, we had single family homes, we had duplexes, we had renters, we had homeowners, and we had a large apartment complex. All those existed on that same block. We had single parents, we had 2-parent family homes, we had just adults living with themselves, folks that had dogs, folks that didn't, and then our family who had every animal you could conceive of, right? We had a church on the back, and we could go anywhere. And I know you hear folks talk about, we could go anywhere. We could walk anywhere. We could ride our bikes. I wasn't one, but my brother used to ride on the railroad tracks. I didn't know we had railroad tracks till I was a grown person, because that wasn't my thing. But we were taken care of by the community, a block up, at the time where UROC sits, King Supermarket, Black-owned grocery store, The Way, Black-led, Black-centered, youth-centered, right, community, exposing young people to fashion. We were never as fashion forward as Miss Anika, but we had fashion. We were taught about being models. We were taught about music. We were taught about our history, and all of those things. So I felt like I could do and be anything. So that was the community I grew up in, the environment. We knew that now, Mr. McFarlane, we knew on the west side of Penn, you were making a few more pennies than folks on the east side, as you know, because you on the west side and I grew up on the east side. And then you go a little further east. But guess what? We all played together and hung out together. That knowing that folks made a few more pennies didn't mean we didn't work together and understand that we didn't have the same goals as far as us having upward mobility and stability. So I have to say, in some ways, I'm disappointed that the more Black people we have gotten, and because of structures, I don't think it's necessarily just because of us. The structures have, invited folks not to live. When they would come when I graduated in '89, and folks were invited to started jobs at General Mills, they were told to live other places. And so that helped to diminish who could live in our communities. I have no idea why the North High districting changed, because when I live on 23rd and Irving, and when it was time for my children to go to high school, they were not supposed to go to North, which they could walk literally 5 blocks. They were supposed to go to Henry. Now, no disrespect to Henry and all the Patriots, even though you are still second best to North. I'm an honorary North High graduate. I hope I'm not talking too much, but I went to Regina High School on the South Side, all-girl Catholic school. Then I graduated from Breck, which was in Golden Valley. I hung out in St. Paul with my cousins. And so I believe that Black folks belong everywhere in this state, and call it all home. And so I do believe we believe that. We've got folks running for mayor in Golden Valley, Black folks running all over this state. So that's a good thing. So we're making progress there. We've got young people in the arts doing things. I didn't mention that. And arts needs to be another piece that is a focus for the Twin Cities and North Minneapolis. That's the other thing about Paris. There is art everywhere, visual, sculpture. And so people are spending money to go see art. So let's put some art up so people spend money let me go to North Minneapolis, to look at juxtaposition, to look at the murals, to look at sculptures that are created. Let's go on the South Side in front of Sabathani and look at, a lion, or I don't know what Scott likes, some kind of sculpture. But anyway, so I'm excited in some ways because we are making things happen. But the forces against us are so strong that while we may be able to have a president of the United States, we can have a George Floyd killed in broad daylight with a man with his hands in his pockets looking at the camera like, do something. And yes, he did go to prison, but the anger and the backlash, I know we're not talking about this, but there's something going on with white folks. And if white folks understand that white is a social construct, whether or not you're white. And so whiteness is a problem, and something's going on with folks in this whiteness that it is upset. So we must be on the brink of doing something really great. I'll end there.
Let's take a break, and we'll come back and talk more about that in just a minute. Thank you, Makeda. Zulu. We're going to come back, and Scott, when I come back, I'm going to ask you to walk down memory lane as well, sort of talk about the world that you envisioned as you were a 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 9-year-old, and how that all folded into the person you are now and the work you do now at Sabathani. I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane. Be right back. Are you or someone you know recovering financially from the COVID-19 pandemic, the lockdown, or any other reason? If so, help is available. Findhelp.org is a site to find a wide range of resources, including food, medical care, and more. The best part is based on your zip code. Visit findhelp.org, enter your zip code and the service you need. You'll get a map directing you to the organizations that can help you. Help is waiting at findhelp.org. If you need help starting anew, findhelp.org is the site for you. Before we go back to Scott, Anika, I want you to remind people of the important events coming up about the last call.
Thank you. First of all, Makeda, when are you running for office? I mean, inquiring minds want to know.
When you tell me it's time, I'll go.
Baby, it's time. Listen. But yes, so we're excited. We're kicking off the Last Call series in Makeda's house at UROC on Monday, October 23rd from 5:30 to 7:30. We will have Jeremiah Ellison and Victor Martinez in the house. And it sounds like Makeda is going to be part of our committee that's helping craft these questions. So maybe even moderating, we'll see. But really excited to have these critical conversations. And then the next day, Tuesday, October 24th, will be in Scott's house at Sabathani from 6 to 8, talking about issues specific to 8th Ward, which is 8th and 9th Ward, 7th Ward, where George Floyd happened, lots of development happening, but more still needs to happen, right? And then Thursday, 10/26, October 26th, we'll be chatting with neighbors in the 4th Ward. We're also going to have a brief presentation from Fair Vote Minnesota. This is a ranked choice voting election, and sometimes that can cause confusion for voters. And so representatives will be there to talk about how to rank choice and the benefits and so forth. I should also point out that these forums, the Last Call series, is sponsored in part by Insight, but also the Monitors Club of Minnesota and the African American Leadership Forum, as well as the Anika Foundation and McKnight Foundation. So we are really keenly interested in making sure that community members have an opportunity to come out and hear from their candidates. This is basically about a week before the election on Tuesday, November 7th. Early voting is open and available now. And then, so if you can't get it in or you can't make it on the 7th, you can go to your polling locations. Those are on our website, blackvotesmattermn.com, where also our 2023 voter guide is published as well. So there's really no reason to not know, but I'm still happily accepting calls and emails if you got a quick question or something. But that's what's happening next week in our community. So come out and get fed, get your questions answered, and talk. Put it to the candidates, and make sure, sometimes we get celebrity, right? Like kind of starstruck, but candidates are folks from our communities who they step into this role to serve and solve problems. At least that's our hope. So you might see them on the news, and media has a way of making folks become celebrified, but these are community servants. And so don't be shy. Don't be starstruck.
Don't be scared.
Don't be scared. Yes. Come out and ask these questions and hold them to it. And one of the things that we'll be looking at doing is how do we hold folks accountable, right? So conversations like these are important because we could go back and say, hey, on Monday 23rd on the conversation with Al McFarlane, we raised these issues. Residents of the community want to know what you're going to do about housing, so what have you done and what do you plan on doing? So it's important to not just get them in and walk away, but to stay at the table and to stay in conversation with them. And if they're not returning your calls or emails, you need to call them out.
There you go. Scott, I see you nodding your head over here. Jump in the conversation and do a variety of things while you got the microphone. One is tell your personal story. Who are you? Whose shoulders do you stand on? And what brings both the passion and the drive to serve your community and your profession. And then as Makeda, and you've done this already, but do it again, outline the challenges in the community that must be addressed, that we must address, and that one of the ways we do that is by selecting and supporting effective leadership at City Council. Therefore, we invite and encourage and demand that we all show up to express our voice, our vision through our vote. But Scott, go ahead, brother.
Sure. So I was born and raised in Waterloo, Iowa, about 3.5 hours away from here. And I would say we always, when people ask, about, we've been talking about equity for a long time. So what our community wanted back in Waterloo, Iowa is the same thing I think what every community wanted. We wanted to have the same things and more that we saw that what other folks had across the railroad. So very segregated town. I lived on the east side of town in Waterloo, Iowa. Our biggest employer was John Deere, and my father was an electrical engineer at John Deere. And I tell a funny story. I'm the youngest of 3 boys, and so when my oldest brother graduated from high school, my father called him into his room, and I remember listening. He said, "Tony, you're my oldest son. You're my smartest son. You're gonna do great things in this world. Make your family proud of you." And my brother went off and he became a electrical engineer, much like my father. My middle brother, he graduated from high school. He was 2 years older than me. He said, "Mark, you're my middle son. You're my smartest son. You're gonna do great things in this world. Go off and make your family proud." He became a chemical engineer. And I came in, he was like, "Scott, after my graduation, I'm all happy." I'm like, "I know the speech. I know what he's gonna say." So he called me into his room. He said, "Scott, you're my youngest son. You're not as smart as your brothers. You're gonna have to work hard, but you're gonna make your family proud of you." And I tell that story because that whenever we get together, I tell that story all the time when my brothers and my father get together. My mom has since passed, but I tell that story because it really put a drive in me to be the best that I can be. I'm naturally competitive. I came to Minnesota in 1987 as a student athlete. I played football at the University of Minnesota and majored in electrical engineering and have an engineering degree here from the University of Minnesota. But what really inspired me to be the person that I am is my background and my upbringing. I remember I felt isolated at the University of Minnesota because so many of us was trying to fit in with them. And that's just who that's in Waterloo. That's not who we are. We're proud to be Black men and Black folks and be Black, to have a Black voice. So I struggled my freshman year at the University of Minnesota, struggled so much that I remembered I called my mom. I said, "Mom, I want to transfer. I want to come back home and go to the University of Iowa, play football there and get an education there." And my mother, who doesn't like change, never drove on a highway, jumped in her car. Now, I said it's a 3.5-hour drive from Waterloo to Minneapolis. It took her 7 hours to drive up here, but she drove up here that next morning, and did a little research and took me over to North Minneapolis. So I'll say a lot. North Minneapolis really kept me and saved my life, because she took me over to Phyllis Wheatley and Bethune Community Center. And I started volunteering on the off season because I was pretty good in math and science. And I started volunteering over there, working with young kids and watching that light go off. And I remember telling my father, I was like, "Dad, I don't think that I want to be an engineer." I said, "I want to do something in education. I want to do something working with the community." And my father, who was from Florida, looked at me and said, "That's something you do in your pastime. That's a pastime. You're going to be an engineer like your 2 brothers. Remember, I told you to work hard." But so I went ahead and I got my engineering degree. But I just always knew what I wanted to do. I like this. Instead of solving the problems of energy and the problems of engineering and designing engineering problems or solving those problems, I like solving problems that happened in the community and what was going on in the community. And given that North Minneapolis was a place where I felt home and made me feel whole and make me feel like I was back in Waterloo, I knew that once I graduated that my master's and would be in the sciences. So I went back and got or social science. So I went back and got a master's in my BS in education, right? And I'm sorry, my master's in education. And I've been doing that ever since. I've been working in the community ever since then. I actually worked with Makeda when I was at the University of Minnesota in the African Americans, African Studies Department. And that's just who I've been grounded. That's the work that I've been grounded in, working with the community and looking at how do we become social engineers to looking at the complex issues that our communities face and how do we solve them together. So that's what I've been doing. I've worked as a chief operating officer at Aon, which is an affordable housing developer, who try not to build those big buildings that you talk about, Makeda, but given that the affordable housing is so prevalent and needed in this city, I worked there, and then came over here at Sabathani. And the things that I see that our community, and again, because we do with our community and not to our community, we always say that we have, that we have four great assets. Over 150,000 people a year come through these doors at Sabathani, and we own 5 acres of land in the city. I think, from what I hear, we own more land. We own more land and property than any other Black community center. So that's important. It's 188,000 square feet. And what I constantly keep hearing from folks in our community, is about that equity work. They want to know, how do we elect candidates that, promote health and wellness, right? Increase, the quality of life and improve health outcomes in our community. We have an apartment complex, a senior apartment complex for 55 plus. And and I was surprised that about a third of them are using walkers and canes to get around. And these are folks who are, 55, 60, 65. That's still young, so changing those health disparities, working with folks like at United Healthcare, the Catalyst program, to change those health outcomes. So one is promoting health and wellness. We have the highest asthma rates of youth in the state, and that's because of 35W runs through our community, and there's carbon emitting buildings like the one we have that we're looking to change. And then it's also about the second thing I would say is increasing economic prosperity. We want to ensure that our individuals and families in our community have small businesses and opportunities to build wealth, to attack the poverty rate, to look at the income rate for what the wealth levels, to build wealth in here and eliminate this unemployment gap that we see between Black and white folks in Minnesota, especially here in South Minneapolis. And I think the third thing is around to support our community. We want candidates that will be a beacon and a hope or a source of hope for critical support for our community. We're 6 blocks where George Floyd was murdered at. And we've lost over, what I hear, 2,000 businesses in Minneapolis or in Minneapolis, St. Paul from the civil uprising. But what's interesting, and you mentioned this earlier, Brother Al, is that this building is a beacon. So with all the broken windows around here, with all the, things that were spray painted on the businesses around here and the buildings, this building wasn't touched because even the youth that was out there looting and raiding knew the importance of this building, knew what Sabathani has meant for the last 57 years. Whether it's coming here, we serve over 120 people a day at our food shelf. We've given away, Sherry's gonna kill me for this because I should know it, but I believe over 80,000 pounds of clothes to our community. And these is for kids to go back to school and for people to go to work in, and creating workforce strategies programs where folks can not get a job but get a career We got great partnerships with folks, and we want what we want is that those same opportunities that folks out in other communities have. We want those same opportunities for our people to look like us, and that's why Sabathani exists. That's why it's so important that the work that Anika's doing to bring people out, to have a voice, to elect the folks that represent them, that represent this community, so that we don't get left behind anymore. It used to be when I was at Minneapolis Public Schools, the big thing was no child left behind back then. Now it's about no community being left behind. And specifically, that's the Black community. We made this community great. In 1930, this community was deemed as an undesirable community, meaning that it wasn't fit for people to live. This was the first place where Black folks can buy and own homes. And we took and we made this into a Black Wall Street with so many Black businesses that once existed, that we made white folks want to come over here and gentrify and become and live in this neighborhood. And now it's being pushed out. When I think about, I heard our county commissioner, who obviously lives in this neighborhood, just 2 blocks down, said that a house across the street from her sold for $750,000. It's a big move to push folks out and to change this neighborhood. And I say we done too much work to give this neighborhood and this community up. And so we're doing all that we can to make sure Black folks reap those benefits of the elders, the folks that came before us, that we stay, that we reap those benefits and that we stay in this community. And so we want folks who are going to recognize that and that's going to make sure that they keep us in this community and work hard to make sure that our voices are not only heard, but action is put towards our wants and our needs and our demands.
Wonderful. Makeda, I was thinking, as you mentioned being in Paris, I think I heard on public radio a few days ago a story about Europe. I thought it was France, and the concept of 15-minute communities. I may be saying this wrong, but the concept was that some people-centered developers are intentional in designing, creating, organizing communities that anybody in that community can get wherever he or she needs to go and get whatever he or she needs to live, to recreate, to entertain, to work, all within 15 minutes, either walking or biking or some other public transportation. And I said, wouldn't that be great if North Minneapolis and Central Neighborhood and Powderhorn had everything our community needed, because we had the entrepreneurs, right? And the businesses and the teachers and the ministers and the service workers to provide everything we need for each other in our community with a system of profitability for all engaged and benefit for all engaged as well. Had you heard that idea? Am I saying it right, Makeda?
I didn't hear that idea, but I would say I experienced the idea, and the other things that I noticed. So I was a committed sedentary person, committed. And I messed around, and I've been hanging out with folks that believe in biking and walking and running, and so that circle is also important, so we can pull each other up. So these are Black folks that like to bike, like to run, and hanging out with those folks. So when we got there, it is a very walkable city. I'm not sure how functional it is if you have if you have mobility issues as far as your legs go.
Mm-hmm.
But just the design of it, they don't need as much space, and I think we could capitalize on some of those ideas to have even more businesses, Black and brown and indigenous businesses along these corridors, and Black specifically. I'm inclusive. I mean, meaning that the restaurants, they face the street. They are people centered. They spend time social. I didn't see folks on their phones like they are here. And so, I think a 15-minute commute, 15-minute communities. And I think that we could also make a point of maybe for the next 2 years, we're only going to buy in our community. And that might mean that we might not be able to get certain goods. So that might mean there'll be more money in our pockets too, but that we only spend in our community, because what I have noticed, another disappointing piece is, the Brookdale Mall. The Brookdale Mall was booming at one time. Then Brookdale Mall closes down and West End develops. Well, why wasn't the West End developed along Plymouth Avenue or along West Broadway or Lowry, or, and I don't know South Minneapolis as well. I used to work out of Sabathani many years ago, Quest for Excellence. And my kids went to New Horizons with Bobby Lay, after school program. So we have people who've been doing. Anyway, I'll try to stay focused. I will end on, there is innovation. We have the imagination and the innovation, and let us remember to praise publicly and correct privately. But being Black or considering yourself an African American is not enough. We have to produce. And we may not know. It is okay to not know. So you get into this job and you don't realize, what all you can do as this servant leader. Ask someone, and let's pull each other's coattails and make sure that we are doing the best that we can do. I think that we have great opportunities. We know what we need, and I will be quiet.
Well, listen, you said a lot, and this has been a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful conversation. And I just want to remind people to go to Black Votes Matter online and get the details about these important community sessions talking about what's at stake in the upcoming elections, the city elections. It's time to pay attention. Pay attention. I think we're at the beginning of as you said, Makeda, something's changed, and as they get more frazzled, I think it lets us know the signal is get together, get yourselves together, and emerge, arise, and be your genuine self. Like your statement about Waterloo, be yourself, right? Don't try to fit in, change the deal, and have the rest of them follow your direction, your lead. Well, listen, thank you so much. Thanks to my friend Anika Robbins, great for helping curate the show. Great for the work that you're doing, Anika. And thanks to Scott Red, and thanks to Sister Makeda Zulu at UROC. I want to say thanks to Vash Bodhi, who has been our producer for the conversation, who's leaving the organization, but thanks to Vash for all of his vision, his work to upgrade, improve, and put us on a different plane, and successfully so. And I want to introduce in the future Cooper Mitchell, who will be joining as a producer of the show. With that, thanks again. I'm Alan McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Alan McFarlane. We'll see you next time.